Rewire Your Anxious Brain. Stop overthinking, find calm, and be present. Written by Nick Trenton, narrated by Russell Newton. Experiencing anxiety is not a character flaw. It's not something that you're doing wrong. And it's definitely not something that's a permanent part of your personality. Instead, it's far easier to remind yourself that anxiety is simply a learned behavior. When we consistently repeat a behavior, our brains store the associated response. The more we repeat, the more entrenched those associations become. Even if you've been anxious for a long time, or your associations are very deep, they are still just habits, and they can be changed. When you think about it, so much of our daily life consists of these automatic, habitual loops. It's just that most of them are quite neutral. The way we make coffee in the morning, the way we get dressed, the order in which we clean the kitchen, and so on. Again, our brain is smart, and it uses this kind of autopilot thinking to help us complete essential but mundane tasks as efficiently as possible. Habits are great. We need habits. They are what allow us to save our mental resources for the real challenges of life. The brain, however, doesn't differentiate between different kinds of information. It doesn't know that it is helping you be really, really efficient at worrying about nothing. The brain does something that is easy and time-saving with no concern for whether it's accurate, useful, or in the interest of your overall well-being. In just the same way as you automatically brush your teeth every morning, you may worry and stress in endless loops. Again, this is not a character trait or a personal failing. The reason you have anxiety doesn't need to involve any heavy trauma from the past or complicated metaphysical explanations. The reason you're anxious today could be as simple as because you were anxious yesterday. The way you currently respond to stress is an indication of the way that you have most consistently reacted to stress in the past. Once the brain has been programmed to respond in a certain way, it will continue to make connections to the same loops, even if those reactions are counterproductive in the present moment. It will continue to do it, that is, until you deliberately stop the cycle. Automatic learning and habit cycles form in the area of the forebrain known as the basal ganglia. The three-part story of how a behavior becomes cemented as a habit goes like this. 1. A cue from the environment triggers you. 2. You do the behavior or run through a routine in response. 3. There's a reward so that the next time you encounter the cue, you remember and do the behavior again. Every single behavior that you do automatically today, good or bad, was once programmed via the above three steps. For example, 1. Cue. You see an email from your boss in your inbox. 2. Routine. You put off opening it for as long as possible. 3. Reward. You don't have to face whatever it is you might find in there, for a while at least. A reward doesn't have to be a carrot on a stick. It can sometimes be the simple avoidance of something unpleasant. Importantly, the cue, routine, and reward don't have to be genuinely linked. If we perceive them as linked somehow, then they are. Every time we run through the routine, the neural pathway strengthens. It gets to be so that we never see an email from our boss and open it immediately. Taking charge of the anxiety loop. Step 1. Map out your anxiety habits. Keep in mind that most of your anxiety habits developed as a way to reduce stress, even if they don't always benefit you in the long run, and even if they ultimately increase stress. The first step is to do a biopsy on your habits and identify the cue, the exact behavior itself, and the reward or consequence. Step 2. Work with your brain's reward system. Your anxious behavior is in place because there is a reason to do it, the reward. Reward a different behavior or stop rewarding the current one, and your behavior will change over time. The great thing is that with awareness, every moment of anxiety is actually a hidden opportunity to learn more about yourself and to grow and develop as a person. When dealing with anxiety, you're never punishing or forcing yourself. You're working with your brain and not against it. You don't want to wrench yourself away from behavior that your brain considers a safety blanket. That will be painful. But if you want to make it so that you naturally become dissatisfied with your old coping mechanisms and move away from them willingly without having to exert much willpower. Step 3. Create new habits. Most suggestions for anxiety reduction only tackle this step and ignore the other two. We all know the healthy habits and behaviors we want to adopt, but we often seem unable to make the logical choice, the thing we actually choose and make a habit. But consider that you're never really breaking a bad habit or eliminating it. You can never be without habits. Rather, you're always replacing bad habits with better ones. Take the habit away without giving yourself something to realistically manage stress, and you risk creating discomfort that'll only have you rushing back to your old tricks, often with even more determination. How does all this look when applied to real life? Let's go back to Annie and the case of the terrible treadmill. Step 1. Annie carefully identifies a behavior she wants to change, her inability to stick with her gym goals. Cue, feeling hot on the treadmill. Behavior, quitting. Reward, a feeling of relief. Step 2. Annie tackles the behavior on both ends. She tries to reduce the cue by making sure that she exercises under the AC vent and brings a spray bottle to keep her cool. She also reduces the reward by asking a trusted friend to hold her accountable to her gym goals. The agreement is that the friend gets $100 if she quits, not to mention the embarrassment. This makes quitting feel like much less of a relief. Step 3. It's not just about engineering a different response, though. Annie also creates new, healthier routines. She gives herself a healthy treat every time she completes a planned treadmill workout. Every time she does, she's creating a new pathway in her brain. Treadmill equals good feelings. Now, some of us might take exception to thinking of our behavior the same way a dog trainer thinks of an Alsatian jumping through hoops. Even though the above might seem overly simple, the truth is that so much of our habitual and automatic behavior is that simple. Stubborn, yes, but not overly complex. The way to break out of these conditioned responses and habits is with mindfulness and awareness. A few tips as you work on your own programming and start to change some of the carrots and sticks that keep it in place. Maintain awareness and a sense of curiosity. Rather than judging yourself for being anxious or getting obsessed about where your anxiety is coming from, just get curious. This is answering how and what questions instead of why questions. What does it feel like and where? How does it change? Get really familiar with yourself and your habits. They're nothing to be scared of. Breathing. Breath and awareness go hand in hand. Tune into the breathing sensations in your body, and you automatically connect to the moment. Try breathing into places where anxiety shows up. For example, Annie notices that her anxiety often feels like hot and cold prickles along the skin of her back and neck, so she slows down, and with every breath imagines that the oxygen she is inhaling is diffusing out into her skin and soothing and calming it. Try the RAIN acronym. This is a mindfulness practice where you relax into the present moment, accept and allow it to be there, investigate your bodily sensations, emotions, and thoughts, and note what is happening. For example, as Annie runs on the treadmill, she breathes deeply and evenly and relaxes. She notices that weird hot feeling, but doesn't fight it. She becomes curious about what is happening, and she simply notices it without reacting and without getting off the treadmill. She's teaching herself to be non-reactive and learning that just because a trigger happens, it doesn't mean she has to respond to it. Noting. This is a practice of labeling what experiences are predominant in your mind moment to moment, including any of your senses: hearing, touch, sight, thinking, or feeling. This creates a sense of distance. More on this technique later in the book. Loving kindness. The practice of sending kind, caring thoughts to people, including yourself, and feeling that sense of warmth in your body. Being gentle and kind with ourselves takes so much of the sting of anxiety away. Often, our anxious thoughts have a punitive or self-critical attitude. What happens instead when we forgive ourselves and hold ourselves with care rather than irritation, fear, or judgment? Every time you use any of the mindfulness techniques from above, you're teaching your brain to be different in the face of old triggers. You're giving yourself a chance to feel something new, to react differently, and to tread some new neural pathways. With anxiety, our minds are hyper-focused on the negative and the threatening, but being mindful tunes us into the positive. You may be surprised to find that breathing, slowing down, and being kind to yourself actually feels pretty good. In time, you may even prefer this to your ordinary sense of relief that avoidance used to give you. Annie has made her arrangement with her accountability partner and has worked hard to change the cues and rewards of a certain behavior. This will take her far, but in the moment-to-moment unfolding of her experience, she can continually remind herself to be mindful and aware of what's happening. This is a very different state of mind to the fearful hyper-focus we get in a runaway anxiety loop. This is the feeling we get when we consciously stop, look around us, and become cognizant of what's happening. From that point, we have a chance to behave differently. So, Annie is on the treadmill one day, and despite being near the AC, she notices that she's beginning to feel hot. She recognizes that awful, sinking feeling of panic rising in her, slow at first, and then, all at once, it seems to be there. It's happening again, she thinks. But this time, instead of strapping herself in for the anxiety roller coaster her body's done so many times before, she deliberately pauses and becomes mindful. She immediately checks in with herself. With a gentle and kind awareness, she notices those familiar feelings across her skin and the speed at which her thoughts are beginning to run. She sees all this and decides there and then to change her thoughts. She tells herself, I'm experiencing these sensations, but I don't have to react to them. I'm not in any danger. I recognize this old anxiety loop because I've been here before and I've come out of it. I'm okay. I'm learning new ways to cope. What do I want to do right now? She looks down at the clock on the treadmill dashboard and, regulating her breathing, tells herself to just focus on the number changing, 1 second reliably after the other. She reminds herself that they're just sensations. She thinks of how she ran on the treadmill yesterday with no problem, and she can do it again today. It's difficult. Several times she feels herself being pulled again into that same old panic spiral. Several times, she pulls herself back. But something interesting happens. She's still on the treadmill when she notices that the feeling is starting to subside. Eventually, it passes completely. For today, Annie has broken the cycle and taken a step towards something new and better. A word of warning here. Analyzing and unpicking the components of your own stress response is a fantastic skill to learn, but don't make it a purely intellectual exercise. Overthinkers and worriers tend to be rather good at ruminating endlessly and examining a tiny detail from multiple angles. This is not what you're doing when you familiarize yourself with the anxiety loop, however. Done incorrectly, analyzing and unpicking can just make anxiety worse. So, how do you know the difference? Well, ask yourself to take every insight and understanding and convert it to real change using action. Don't just learn something new about yourself and think, that's interesting. Ask, what small change you can make right now? Then watch what happens. Unless your analyzing and unpicking results in concrete changes in your world, it will serve no purpose. This has been Rewire Your Anxious Brain. Stop overthinking, find calm, and be present. Written by Nick Trenton, narrated by Russell Newton. Copyright 2023 by Nick Trenton. Production copyright by Nick Trenton.